Hi, I'm Dave Miller. I'm the Director of College Counseling at Stevenson School in Pebble Beach, and I'd like to welcome you to today's segment of College Prep for You. And our goal, both last year and this year, is to inform parents and families and students in the community as much as we can about the interesting process of college applications and admissions. We had 13 programs last year, and we've got a plan for 16 this year, carrying us all the way through June. This is the 9th show. Today we're going to finish up a little bit of what we did last time, 2 weeks ago, and then we're going to start a new focus with another topic. In the first 8 shows, we had a broad overview of the process. We had a college panel of both students and admissions officers in our chapel. We had about 200 parents there, and we had basically a question and answer session. We've talked about standardized testing. We've talked about financial aid and merit aid. We talked about just the philosophy of going to college, why you want to go to college, what are your goals, how you can make things happen. We've also talked about thinking about that process. And then last time we talked about choosing colleges, all the things that go into that obviously necessary component. We're going to finish that off today, and then we're going to jump over to really the most practical, specific, simple, direct, nuts and bolts aspect of this application process, all the specific things that you need to do between now and next year. This is a little out of sync. Usually we try to be right directly in alignment with what our juniors or our seniors are doing. Right now, juniors are starting the process. They've started to meet with their counselors. They've started to fill out some paperwork. But they won't be doing exactly what we are doing right now. I, in fact, will be giving this workshop to our students in the fall. We don't have this program early in the fall. If we would get to that point, I'd probably move this to that time slot. So just for now, I have a willing suspension of disbelief, and imagine we're in the fall of the senior year, and we're going to talk about those specific things that everybody has to do all over the country in terms of learning about college and then applying to it. The two big things that all students have to do, and this has been a theme throughout this whole series, one, you have to know about yourself. You have to know who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and know exactly what you have to market to the colleges. Basically it's marketing, it's selling. You're trying to portray yourself to the schools that you want to accept you. The other part that's very important is you have to learn about the colleges so that once the ball gets into your court, you can make a decision about the best schools for you. So the two big things, the really tough things, are to decide who am I, where do I want to go, what do I want to learn, and what's the best place for me for 4 years. And then the other thing, there's a huge learning curve because there are about 3,500 choices that you can make. And the huge thing here is to learn about a variety of other colleges so that you can have this match that we keep talking about. You don't want to have an overqualified person applying to an under-matched school, nor do you want to have the opposite. A really difficult school and a student that doesn't quite match up because of abilities and capacities. So we're going to talk about those things today and hopefully answer a lot of specific questions for you. But as has been the case in the past, we have a guest from school. Sometimes we have adults, sometimes teachers, sometimes people from the other side of the desk, the admissions offices. Today we have another one of the seniors at Stevenson School. So before we get started with the two PowerPoints and the discussion, the conversation we'll have today, let's meet Eric. Eric Kim is a senior. He comes from Korea. He's been at Stevenson for 3 years. Eric, let's tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a senior, as you know, and I'm enjoying my senior life right now because I'm done with college apps. I'm a senior who loves the science and math. I'm taking AP Physics B and Calculus BC, and I'm also interested in music. I play the flute in the band, and I also participated in the musical this winter term, which was a lot of fun. And, well,
so you got a pretty full plate of math and science and music, and you're probably a dorm head or something, a leader on campus. You do some things like that. People look up to you. It seems like I remember when I wrote for you, we talked about, you do a lot of, in the past you've done a lot of volunteer work.
Yes,
right?
I have.
I know when you're at home in South Korea, in Seoul, pretty big city, yes. You work at the local hospitals there. Tell us about that for a second.
Well, during the summers, I went to Samsung Medical Center, which is a big hospital in Korea. There I volunteered to work at the Diabetes Center, where I translated English publications into Korean. And I learned a lot about diabetes, which was very interesting. I wanted to pursue a career in medicine, so that was a very enlightening experience for me.
So you put all these things together, what you do outside of the class, and then also what you do in class, the hard science, the physics, the math, the calculus, all of this is going to help you get into your long-term goal, which is to do what?
To go to medical school.
Yeah, hopefully be a doctor, yeah.
Yeah.
And is that going to be here or is that going to be back in Korea?
Well, I'm thinking of staying in the U.S. for medical school and college. So
And you've been here for a while, right?
yes, I've been in the U.S. for more than 9 years. So
So you've been here in America longer than you've been in Korea.
yes, I have.
And you've got obviously wonderful English. And how's your Korean holding up?
Well, I'm getting a little bit rusty, but I'm still pretty good.
Okay. You started out down in Los Angeles, right? You were in public
Yeah.
school there and then came up your sophomore year to Stevenson.
Yes.
And well, that's a pretty big jump for you, right? Eric was there with his parents. His parents were both educators. His father's an engineer and a professor in Korea, but he studied over here and then he taught here. But at UCLA, Northwestern, a variety of good places, right?
Yes.
And you sort of grew up in his shadow being the professor and your mother's a teacher, so education is obviously fairly important to you and also your culture. Tell us about the Korean culture.
Well, there's a lot of formalities, but my parents have taught me that, and well, being teachers, they helped me a lot during the college process, so I owe big time
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah, we work with, both when I was at Seaside High School and since I've been at Stevenson, I've worked with lots of Pacific Rim families. And right now we've got a wonderful diversity of people, Taiwan, the mainland, Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, Japan, all over the place. And probably this is a double-edged sword, I could say that I respect the Korean families the most because they're so hyper about education, but I also fear the Korean families because they're also so hyper. How is that figuring in with your experience?
Well, I can say that's true.
Your parents give you a lot of pressure or they give you a little room?
Well, they give me a lot of pressure, but they leave the choices to me. So
Yeah, and that's a good enlightened, hopefully Western, thing that they've picked up. And that's probably a good point that we can make here. If parents are watching, we want to tell you about the nuts and bolts. We also want to talk about, the philosophy. And one of the things we deal with our families is, help your kid be successful, put them in a place where they can achieve and be excellent, but then sort of stand back and let them make the decisions. And hopefully that's going to happen in your case, right?
Yep.
Okay, I think we're going to turn to our first PowerPoint to finish off what we started last week. And feel free to jump in anytime here, and I'll toss you some questions once in a while. But basically, the last time we were live here in our last show, we talked about three things. Well, we talked about a lot of things, but we talked about how you choose colleges and basically how you pick the three different levels of colleges. And we were just finishing with the range, the three different types that you pick, and I had a couple of examples of the UC system. And I wanted to share some more of those before we close out today. For example, liberal arts school is a small undergraduate focused place, and a good example of the three tiers, if you're interested in liberal arts schools, would be the following. A reach school would be one where just to review, where you have a really difficult time getting in, you're sort of surprised that you get in. It's your dream school. And for a liberal arts place, in fact, I've got your school up there, Eric, Amherst. That's exactly Amherst. Amherst is exactly Eric's dream school, is Reach School. Pomona is another one, and Middlebury. Those are really tough schools to get into. A mid-range school would be called a target school. We have a much better chance. Would be Colby, Trinity, Kenyon, really good places all over the country. And then a star school, I call them a star school because you can be a star there. You're a little bit overmatched or undermatched, and so you'd be one of the smartest people on campus, the most adept, powerful, and so forth. And in that same category would be Pitzer, Dickinson, and Occidental. Now, if we look at the same thing in terms of mid-range places in California, a mid-range, really tough mid-range place would be Pepperdine. Really good numbers to get in there, really competitive, just slightly off of USC. And then a little easier would be Santa Clara. So if a person would get in Pepperdine, they probably for sure would get into Santa Clara. And then the easy one would be University of San Francisco. Now, this is just relative to each other. Everybody has reach schools, target schools, and safety schools. Probably for Eric, all three of these levels of schools would be probably in his mid-range, maybe even a safety range. What's your reach school? We mentioned Amherst. How about your mid-range? What are some places you have?
Mid-range includes colleges like RPI, Rochester, Maybe Bowdoin.
Yeah, okay. Bowdoin still could be pretty stiff. And how about ones you know for sure that, in fact, you've even gotten in some schools already? What would those be?
Apply to Pacific and Penn State.
Okay. Good. So that's a good range for him. If you're going to apply this paradigm to film schools, like some students pick a school just based on a specific interest or career or preparation, and film is a very popular one. So if we're going to look at film schools, the very top range ones would be Brown and Columbia, two Ivy League schools, very difficult to get into, and then within that, film is even more difficult. So you'd have to really have your act together to get into these three schools. Mid-range target place would be USC and Miami. Oh, they're very, very difficult to get into, and then the film schools, again, would be tougher, certainly not as tough as Brown or Columbia. And then a little easier, but still wonderful film schools, Emerson in Boston, Chapman down in Orange County, and LMU right near the airport in Los Angeles. Applying this to Catholic schools, a lot of our kids are attracted to the very fine Catholic schools, a lot of Jesuit schools. This would be the range. The very top Catholic schools would be Georgetown, Notre Dame, and Boston College. Different teaching orders, but wonderful Ivy-type credentials necessary to get into those three schools. Target schools for Catholic applications would be Holy Cross, Villanova, Marquette, just a little bit easier. And even within that middle range, Holy Cross is definitely tougher than Villanova. Villanova is definitely tougher than Marquette. And then the third, little easier group where you can become a star, your safety school, good Catholic places, Santa Clara, LMU, and USD and St. Mary's. And probably of those, USD is probably the toughest. Okay, so moving from that paradigm, that discussion of three tiers of schools, and you look at all three, and you're measured both as a person and you're measured as in terms of your academics. Like your academics are very, very strong. You've got good test scores, good class rank, GPA, really hard classes. And then I would say, and I hope I can be frank with you, I would say that you're outstanding as a person. But you've got two really top-notch things. You've got the music and the volunteer stuff. Mm-hmm. But if you could change those into numbers, they wouldn't be quite as strong as your numbers. But that's good because the numbers are always much more important. Okay, so let's look at how we pick colleges. And before we start in this, let me just ask Eric a question. What's the number one thing for you and your family for you picking a college? What was your main criteria?
Well, how well I do in the college, of course.
Okay, so you get an educated guess about how successful you would be. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
Well, what classes they offer and how big the class size is.
Okay, those are all really good questions, but also you had a little extra thing that other people don't have. You were concerned about these 7-year programs. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about those?
Well, I want to go to medical school, and some colleges offer medical programs that could get you into medical college in 7 years.
And the real benefit is you don't have to do what?
I don't have to take the MCAT.
You don't have to take those dreaded standardized tests. So there are good things and bad things about that. But Eric is an example of a student who's done his homework, he knows himself, he knows other colleges, and he's worked to get this match that's appropriate. And I trust that Eric didn't make any of these mistakes I'm going to share with you now. Ways to pick the wrong college. Okay, because my boyfriend or girlfriend is there, bad idea. I've got lots of examples where students from Stevenson were going together, they applied to the same school, and they were broken up before the school year even started. Because my friend's going to go with you or go with me, and I almost made this mistake myself. I was 16 years old, my best friend, a kid named Jeff Hill, we visited University of Pennsylvania together, we played football, we were being recruited, and we thought, oh geez, we could play college ball together. Well, luckily, for me, Jeff wasn't accepted, and I didn't have to face that decision. It wouldn't have been the wrong place for me. It was a city and a lot of things I didn't like, but I would have thought about going there because he was my buddy. It's just a terrible, terrible reason to do that. Because the tuition is low, I think that's probably an unfortunate myth, because you should worry about getting into the school first and then worry about solving the problem. And you should apply to enough places so that you've got some choices. And that's an important aspect, but it shouldn't be the tail that wags the dog. Everybody talks about, I want to go to a place where I party hardy and have a good time. And you can have a good time anywhere. I've heard that Stanford's a party school, that Chico State's a party school, that Boulder's, I've heard every place in the world is a party school. And I think that's up to you. And what you want to do and what you want to give to the school and what you want to get out of the school. I don't suspect that's a big thing in Korea.
Could be.
I think your parents would probably get rid of you if you made your decision on the party hardy reputation. Another thing that's absolutely misleading is these glamorous guidebook pictures. You get these things that tell you about the campus, and they all look alike. They're all very fascinating, and you can't make your decisions because they never show you the snow. They never show you the studying for the all-nighter. They don't show you all those bad things. So you want to avoid that if you can. We have these kids do computer programs to make their list of schools, and it's a good guideline, but you want to live with that because computers sometimes make some mistakes and they just don't make the right fit for you. Another reason I think is a poor one, because you visited there. Just because you were there doesn't mean it's the right place for you. You could go to a place that you never visited and sort of luck out and things could work out for you. So try to disregard that one. Because it's easy and because it's close, I think that's probably a decision that the vast majority of American kids make. Most people get into the first choice, and most people only go about 60 miles away from their home, and that's probably not the absolute best way to pick colleges. This is also a bad one because your parents don't like it and you fight them, or because your parents do like it and you want to be opposite your parents. So you don't want to have negative reasons. You want to try to positive. Also, because you can get in doesn't necessarily mean that means that it's a right place for you. There's lots of places you can get in. In fact, most kids can get into most colleges, so that's probably not a good guideline for you. This is another one that's, I think, particularly applies to our school because of its prestige. If you have a brand name, or especially in Pacific Rim, where we have lots of our students and where you're from, how does that play in Korea? These brand names of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Northwestern, Berkeley.
Of course, everyone wants to go there.
And why? What's the thinking there?
They just think that if you go to that school, you'll be a good student, you'll achieve more than going to like a school nobody knows.
Yeah, and I guess it's like the chicken and the egg, which comes first. I suspect that the kids who go to those schools are already pretty good students and they're probably going to be successful. Another good thing to avoid, you don't like the school, but it has the major that you want, it has the program you want. You want to do medicine, pre-medicine, that sort of thing, but you're not going to go to any old school that has it. You're going to be a little more discriminating. Okay, so overall, if those are the negatives, those are the things that we don't want you to do, let me give you some advice. Let's start with Eric. What's the one single piece of advice you would give our students and families?
I think the best advice I can give is listen to your parents. They've lived longer than you, they've applied to colleges, so they know the process.
Yeah, and I think that's probably not bad advice. And certainly in Eric's case, it's great because he's got a professor and a teacher, and the Korean culture is fairly strong with education and making that really count and making it matter. My advice would be, this is not life and death. It's not the end of the world. It's not getting married. It's not having your kids. It's just going to college. And so it's important, but it's not the be-all and the end-all. And I would suggest that you should have fun with the whole process and then try to have fun in college as well. That can be some of the best times of your lives. And this is what I try to do with my own kids. Take a stretch, take a chance, go to some place that maybe is different, exotic. A lot of our kids are trying schools in the UK and Australia, Canada. If they're in California, they go back east or down south, places where they normally don't go. So stretch yourself, take a chance. If you're from California, get out of California. In fact, that's a real benefit. I always tell people, go where you're not represented. Go where people aren't like you, and then you'll be like a trendsetter. You'll become a minority. You'll become something they want. And of course, Californians are a big group of people. They go everywhere, and so they're a pretty big population, lots of places. But still room for Californians in the Midwest and in the South. And what I've also told a lot of these kids is go elsewhere and then come back to California for grad school, for your job. If you like this place, fine. I understand that. But look out and see some other things. Also play to your strengths. Like Eric has obvious strengths in science, math, physics, symbol systems. He's really good in music. So he's going to play that strength in terms of his application. He's going to write about it. He's going to have people write about him. He's going to have his resume. He's going to pick schools that value those strengths. So try to play to whatever strengths you have. And again, to underline, go where you're not represented. For example, do you run into many Asians and Asian Americans in California?
Not usually.
Oh yeah, we do. I mean, just Los Angeles, San Francisco. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I didn't see a person of Asian background till I came west. So they're on the coast in the cities, Midwest, South. Very few people of the Pacific Rim culture. So you have a little bit of an advantage. What kind of an advantage do you have in going to UCLA or Berkeley?
Well, I could stand out if I have a lot of good resume stuff.
Yeah, but there are tons and tons of kids like you.
True.
Tons of really driven, great students. So again, our advice is try to go where you've got a better advantage, and then work for fit and not for prestige. And I know that's difficult. It's hard to walk away from. There's more than one perfect school for you. In fact, there are probably 5 or 10 or 20 great schools. Follow your heart. You know, you're going to eventually make a visceral decision. It's your life, and you should do what you want to do, not necessarily what your friends or your parents want. And you're going to enjoy college. You know, things are going to be fine. You'll forget about all this anxiety. Your life's going to be good. You'll have a job. You'll have kids. You'll get married. You know, you're going to have some of the best times in your life. You'll make lifelong friends. Perhaps even meet your wife or your husband. And for sure, and you shouldn't remember your grades or your scores or where you applied. If you do, shame on you. And even if you really want to go to your dream school, say your dream school is Berkeley, and you don't get into Berkeley as an undergraduate, you can still go to Berkeley. You can go to Berkeley for grad school. If you don't get into a certain school for med school, you go to another one, then come back and do a residency at that med school. So things can happen. It might be a more of a circuitous route, but instead of going this way, you go this way. But you can get there. It just won't be as quick as you want. Okay, so there are lots of things you can do. But one final piece of advice: rejection can be a good thing sometimes. And I'll tell a little story on myself. I applied to 2 grad schools. I probably should have applied to more. You know, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. Did not get into the East Coast school. Just broke my heart. I wanted to go there. I was disconsolate for several days, weeks, and I grudgingly came west when I got this other letter that said you've been accepted. I really didn't know much about the school. Well, I come out to the school. It's a wonderful place. I'm in California. In fact, I'm doing this show today simply because I was rejected, you know, at other school. But the good thing, I met my wife, and we have 2 wonderful children. I live in Carmel, California. I've had 2 wonderful careers in teaching because of that rejection. So I'm saying this very seriously. Rejection can be a good thing. So things always work out for the best. Look at the glass half full. You can always achieve your dream or goal, and you know, things are going to be fine. So with that advice, when I move to you know, the next PowerPoint here, we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts. You talked about your first piece of advice, you know, listening to your parents. What else do you have in mind to share with people, Eric?
Well, it's good to gather information first. You can go online, you can look up the schools on their websites, you can get mail from them. You have a lot of information out there, so you have to look through all of it. It might be a painful process, but it helps you eventually.
And you hung in there and did all that, and that's why I asked you, because you're one of those people that just sort of hammered it out, and you stayed on top of things, didn't get behind. Okay, we're going to talk about those things that I guess you can do on your own. You can struggle and do hit and miss and learn by trial and error, but if you've got a game plan, if you have somebody to go to, if you've got easy access to a counselor, or you've read some books, your parents have gone through it, or maybe an older brother and sister, it's going to be much easier for you. So I'm going to try to ease the burden and the load here and use some of Eric's thoughts. So we're going to talk about admissions, the process, and the organization. Okay, basically through the year, you're going to have to do what a good journalist does. You're going to have to cover who, what, why, where, when, and how. And that's what we're going to address here. So getting organized, you need to get something like this. And this is the only thing, a prop that I brought to show you, but all of you need to have some sort of bin or folder like this with labels on them. So when you get all these papers and materials, you can put them in here and they won't get lost and be organized. Tell me you did something like this.
Actually,
What did you have?
I have a folder for each school.
Oh, one for each school. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Did that help you out?
Yes, I can put all the information in one slot, and then I can just take a look at it, find what I need.
Did you use the labels I gave you? You make up your own. Yeah, it's good to have labels. The idea is that you sort things, you sift them out, you throw them away, otherwise you're being buried with paperwork. It's a really good idea to keep records of your scores. Now, I keep record of all your stuff, but did you keep them in a certain place? You knew what you're doing all the time?
Yes.
Okay, because you got to have all this. Did you do the TOEFL, or did you not have to do that?
I actually had to do this.
Yeah, TOEFL, the SAT 1, the SAT 2. Did you do the ACT?
No, I haven't.
So you did a lot, though. Okay, and then there's an application checklist. And that little star there tells you, I'm going to show you what an example that is. But did you use a checklist, one that you put on each folder?
Actually, no.
Okay, well, shame on you. You did a good job, but not a perfect job. So that's a good way to keep track of things and check off that you did everything you're supposed to do with every school. And you didn't miss anything, right? You didn't make any big mistakes, and nothing fell through the cracks. Okay, this is what an example of these file folders, and you can make these up, or maybe your counseling office will have them, but it's a place for everything. The ACT, your AP things, the workshop notes, your SAT results, your resume, what your parents have to say, your scholarships, and then your list of schools. And then you should eventually have one folder for each college, like Eric did. Okay, some other things about the application process. You've got to get in and talk to your counselor. Even if it's a big public school and you don't have a great deal of access, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And we started meeting pretty early, and you were pretty diligent. We met several times. And how would you characterize the access? Like when you wanted to see me, was I available?
Yeah, you were. It was
Okay, and when
really-
I wasn't, you can throw something at me to get my attention and I'll help you out. But you got to get somebody to be your advocate, and you got to go to some place for answers here. We keep records of all of our meetings, and I give them back to the kids or I give them back to the students, and I'll show you that little star shows you. I'm going to give you an example of this form that we use. You have to prepare a list of schools, and your list was sort of organic. It kept on growing and changing, right? And I was sort of surprised at some at the end, but in fact, I even got some schools yesterday and today from some students who are a little bit worried and they're still creating their list. You had yours done about what time?
About New Year's, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's right about when the first toughies were due, January 1st. Okay, and you look through lots of books and the internet and CDs. We talked about that in prior programs. There are virtual reality tours. You can be on campus without really being there to learn about them. You can visit schools. How many schools do you think you visited?
Actually, I didn't get to visit any of the schools except UC Berkeley.
Yeah, because you didn't go back east.
Yeah.
But you took a little trip on your own around here? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're going to maybe be in for some surprises when you go to campuses. And you can do that after you get your applications or your admissions in April. You've got like a month or so to get around and see some schools. And obviously you send off for some information, applications. If they don't come to you, then you search them out. And you can do these online, but you got to get all this stuff lined up. Okay, here's an example of our the Stevenson School College Counseling paperwork. You know, we use these. It's almost like a doctor doing an analysis, an assessment, an evaluation, and your strengths, your weaknesses, what all the vital signs are, all your data, class rank, GPA. And then we make a little summer plan. We talk about researching these schools, and you finally got to come down to your 3 categories of schools. So we got a place for all of this information. And it doesn't matter what the form is like. You have to have some way to get organized so you're keeping track and somebody's responsible. Okay, some other things about this process. You download the applications. Is that how you went about it, or did you get the paperwork itself?
I downloaded everything.
And just printed it all out and got it. So how many of those did you have to do?
Well, there's a Common App, but every application has a supplement, so I had to print out a supplement for every school.
Yeah, so you went that route. We'll talk about the Common App in just a second. In fact, it's right now, the Common Application. It covers about, 300 and some schools now that share the same type of application. So you're putting uniform, consistent information down. It saves you loads and loads of time. And every year it's grown from like 75 schools now to about 350 or 375. And you used it for all of your schools?
All except one.
So the value is you're doing one application, but then you have to do a couple little Mickey Mouse supplements, right?
Supplements.
What would be an example of a supplement?
Well, there would be extra essays you need to write in addition to the Common App essay.
Yeah. And it's a way that they make themselves very, very distinct, all right? But we're moving in the right direction. We're moving towards what Canada and the UK and other schools do. We have a thing called Naviance on our site. A lot of schools use Naviance, and they're ready-made links. Maybe in your counseling office you get a link to other schools, other applications, so it's really easy to find them. The easiest way to find a school is just Google it, right in the corner, Arizona or Northwestern, whatever, and all the stuff comes flying out at you. So if you're conversant at all with the computer, you're in pretty good shape. Now, there's a thing called application waivers. Were you aware of this? Probably didn't apply to you, and it didn't apply to too many people. But if you're in a situation where you have one or more family members maybe out of a job, you don't have enough family income, it doesn't mean you can't go to college. You can still take tests, you can still apply to college, and the colleges and the testing bureaus will provide what's called a waiver. And they come to your counselor, and it's basically a document that says you have a certain family income or standard of living, or you're on a free and reduced lunch program, something like that, that you can use this voucher, a waiver that somebody has to officially sign and document, and you send that in instead of the check. Now it's limited to like 4 or 5 times maybe 4 times for the taking the SAT 1s and 2s, and you can use that for 4 colleges. So you can't apply to these 20-odd schools, but don't let money keep you back from applying to school. Go in and talk to people, get an advocate, get somebody who knows what's going on to help you do what's right and fair. And in terms of discussion, you want to have this discussion with your family. School is getting very, very expensive, no matter if you go to public school or private school, whether you have lots of money or whether you have no money. And so I think that you need to talk finances. Did your family do that?
Yeah, I had to turn in financial statements because I'm an international student.
Oh, so that's another thing. If you're an international student, if you're accepted, your family has to prove to that university that you have the ability to pay. They can accept you, but if you show up on the doorstep of the college and can't pay, then they're in trouble. So the international students have to do that. It's a little discriminatory, but I'm talking about your family finances. What discussion did your family have about you going to college and how they would pay for it?
Well, they were really supportive. They said, you can apply to any college you want. We'll try to help you as much as we can.
Yeah, so your job was getting into college. Their
Yes.
job was to pay for it. We unfortunately, or fortunately, had the same agreement with our kids, and you said you work hard, get into a good school, and we'll make it happen, and it's pretty tough. Some people have an agreement, we'll do half the school, you have to have a job, whatever, but you need this conversation before the school starts, not after it's a little too late. Okay, we mentioned, Eric mentioned that international student ability to pay form. You have to have, Eric's got to go to his dad, and his dad's got to go to his banker, and they've got to fill out this form that proves to the colleges, to Amherst, to RPI, to Rochester, that you have the ability to pay. It's sort of a little nuisance that doesn't affect most of our students. Okay, everybody, no matter where you go, you're going to have to send in transcripts to the colleges. And where do you get those transcripts, Eric?
Well, I got it from the College Center, from you.
Yeah, you come and ask me, and where do I get them?
You get it from...
The magical transcript place. Now, there's a place, every school has a registrar, and they keep records of all things, tests, transcripts, scores, grades, all that. And it's her official job. She makes an official record of that and sends those. Most schools want an official transcript. Some will take unofficial transcripts, but you need to learn at your school what is required. How do you start the process? In our school, we ask students to bring either a yellow form for all the schools, and you had how many schools? 10?
10,
12?
yeah.
Yeah, so Eric put all of his schools on this form, and he gave it to me. And if you would have applied to the UCs, which you didn't.
I did.
Or did?
Yeah.
Okay. He gave me this blue one for the UCs. So private schools, public schools. He gives these to me. What else did you give to me?
I also gave you the counselor recommendation.
Yeah, a secondary school report form. That's another way of saying the guidance counselor form. It's the person on campus who represents you in terms of the school. So he gave those to me, plus envelopes, stamped, addressed, because I don't do any busy work like that. So he gave that all to me. I checked that he was ready, and then we were ready to go. He takes care of his stuff, I take care of my stuff. In fact, let's sort of do this right now. I can just show you what this is like. I'll come to it, but we'll put that on hold. The UC system and the Cal State system applications are just a little bit different. They're self-reporting, which means you have to do all that stuff, and I'm sort of in a vacuum. I really don't know what you're doing unless you come in and tell me with this blue form. Sometimes we have little mistakes that way, but it's just a little bit different because the place is so big. Okay, some other things about the process. Here we are with cannibalizing. This is what I wanted to do. Okay, this is the common application. Okay, this is what Eric's talking about. It hasn't changed very much for several years, but it comes like this, and you break it into 3 parts. Okay, you cannibalize it. Okay. And this is the part that Eric does. So I will give this to Eric. Okay? He spends all of his time on that. This is the part that Eric gives to the teachers. This is the teacher recommendation form, and he gives it to at least 2 teachers. So again, that's his job. And then this is the part that I do. Eric gives this to me. It's called the secondary school report form, the guidance report form. I'll show you in a second on the overhead. But this is the part where I know I've got to get started. So I do this, I fill this out. We actually have our own form that we attach to this. I get a transcript, I get a school profile that tells everything about the school, and then I get Eric's transcript. And I put all those things together in a big envelope, and I send those off to every school that Eric is applying to. How do I know how many schools? Because they're on this yellow form. And Eric has given me a large envelope stamped and addressed for every school. So we double check that way. Now, what is it that I put into his large envelope? Well, this is a copy of his transcript, and attached to that, the transcript is a record of what you've done for 4 years. It can't hide anything. It's the most important thing here. And in his case, he doesn't have to hide it because it's wonderful. And this is a profile of the school. It's 3 or 4 pages, tells everything about the school so the colleges know what kind of school he went to. Then this is the work that I do. I write a 2 or 3 page, 1 to 3 pages, usually about 2 pages on each student. I represent them to the school, tell the good, bad, the ugly, everything about them, a lot of really nice things. I support them a great deal. And then we fill out a secondary school report form, which I'll show you in a second. We put those in the envelope, we send them off, and then my part is done, and Eric is going to do his part. So we're cannibalizing these applications. We're going to give the secondary school report forms to your counselor. You're going to give the teacher recommendation form to the teacher. You're going to send in the test scores to every test for every school you're applying to, and it's your job to do that because you own those. And then if you are an athlete, if you're an artist, if you do films, you might also have to send in a portfolio, some tapes, DVDs that you prepare. And you send those into the admissions office, and they send them off to the appropriate department. Okay, here's an example of a common application. They don't change year to year. A lot of personal data, you can't see a great deal here, I apologize for that. Just know that it's the basic application most people do. This is the front and this is the back. Lots of information for you, your family, the courses you're taking, test information, and then lots and lots of things about your extracurriculars. Eric would be putting lots of stuff for band and music, a lot of honors there, and you put those in a certain order. They also have some short answer questions and then a personal statement. That is the essay, and usually you have 3 or 4 choices. Eric, what are some that you remember doing? You probably did at least 2 essays, right? Mm-hmm. And you talked about music at heart, as I remember.
Yes, I did.
Okay, what else?
I also wrote about my experiences at the hospital.
Oh, that's right, exactly. So your 2 big things, your 2 big passions, where you're hanging your hat, that's what you're going to talk about. You certainly didn't talk about being a linebacker on the football team, all right? Because that's not you. And you didn't talk about being a volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club. You certainly weren't in the Boy Scouts. I mean, those sorts of things, great things, but for other people. So whatever your 2 big things are, that's what's going to help you get in. Okay, more things about this process. About the essay, you've got to spend lots and lots of time. We want you to start in the spring and then work on it through the summer, end up in the fall. I seem to remember reading yours several times. How much time did you put into your essays?
A lot. I actually spent my summer starting the application
Okay,
process.
Don't scare people. They don't have to do that much, but you have to be serious about it and do half as good a job as Eric did on that essay. It's a really important thing. Parents, did your parents help you with the basics at all?
Yeah, they looked over my essay. They helped me organize stuff.
We don't want your parents applying for you, but it's good to help them. We try to help our kids as well as we could. Now, interviews. You're applying to some hard schools. Have you had your interviews yet?
No, not yet.
Yeah, so you're getting ready for that. And that can be an ingredient. In fact, we had a little show on that. And get somebody to help you with the interviews. This is a key thing. Try to maintain some quality communication with the school throughout the year. That means you send them notes, you update them with things, something new happens to you, you're selected to an all-star team, whatever. Keep them in touch because they want to know what you're doing. They want to keep on knowing what you're doing. Also, we have a thing called the mid-year report form that tells what your grades are through the year. And you can also add new data about what's happening to you personally. And all schools don't require that. In fact, this is the form. It's part of the common application, and lots of places for you to write good things here. Okay, the application form itself, you want to read it thoroughly. Don't make any assumptions. And here's something that you should do that most people don't. You want to make a copy of it, a photocopy of it, and then practice with it, play with it. Just have a, just a practice dry run. Be very detailed, very neat, complete. Obviously, I don't think you want to handwrite it. I don't think you want to use a pencil. You want to have black ink, or printed ink. Have your parents help you with that. Double check. If you want to, and this is what I suggested, if you have lots more information than you have room for, you put it on a computer and then you do away with the margins and you even put what you have to say over the instructions. So you're using as much space as you can. So you have to cut and paste and then maybe make a picture of the whole thing and sending it in. Obviously, you're going to do a rough draft first before you do the final copy. Okay, some other things about the application form. And how difficult did you think the applications were to do?
It took some time.
A lot of time,
yes.
But it's not rocket science, right? It's just sort of hanging over your head like a term paper all the time, right? That's a good reason to do the Common App. Okay, what should you put in there? Evidence about your 2 passions. Like you had to prove about your music, and you proved about the volunteer work you did. So you can document that. And also, I should be talking about it. The 2 others should be teachers talking about it. Anybody who knows you should confirm your application. And it's sort of like a team effort, joint effort. What they want is depth, not width, not scope. Like they don't care that you did 25 different things because you didn't do 25 things. You shouldn't do 10 things. You can't do 10 things well. You can do 2 things pretty well, like Eric has. And you got to prove that and put a lot of evidence there, documentation. Again, develop your edge, your angle. It could be athletics, could be drama, could be leadership, could be service, but you have to separate yourself from other people. Spacing, that's another way of saying use as much space as you can. Cut and paste, disregard their instructions, disregard the margins. It's more important for you to put as much information as you can. If you have a social security number, you want to use that, include it. That's the way they find you and follow you. Sometimes they'll use a birth date. I guarantee you there's lots of Kims out there and lots of Lees and lots of Smiths, so you don't want to get your stuff mixed up with other people. Okay, other details, absolutely do not meet the deadlines. When's the major deadline, Eric?
It's January.
Yeah, usually
15th,
January 1st.
usually.
It's okay if I get my stuff in a little bit later, but you can't get yours late. And the teachers can be a little later, but you don't want to miss that January 1st date, or November 1st, or just whenever it is. You can prove that you've applied with a certificate of mailing in case somebody loses something. Again, you rely on the common application. There's a Catholic application that's good for most of the Catholic schools, and it'll save you time. You can go to a place called College View, and they've got lots of applications. But when in doubt, do an electronic application that you can prove, you can save it, it's quick, you can do it at the last minute. And all the offices are putting things electronically into a computer. They cut and paste, they scan them in. So people are going paperless pretty much these days. There's another thing you need to be aware of is the UC Pathways. That's the application trail to the UC system, and you use that, and it's fairly simple, right? Self-reporting.
Yes.
Any problems with that?
No, it's actually pretty simple.
Pretty easy. We go through that one evening in the fall. We'll do that again for the seniors. Okay, a couple other things. Academic considerations. This is the most important. Academic considerations, then they look at you as a person, and then they decide based on institutional needs. What do they want? And they're also at huge admissions through athletics. There's a legacy admission, there are special interest admissions, and then developmental admissions. These are ones that I want to explain in a little detail here. Okay, academic considerations. These are the first and foremost, the most important ways you get into school. This is how Eric's getting into school. This is how everybody in high school these days are getting in, mainly through their academics. Now, what is the most important thing? The transcript. That's why it's in big letters. Probably 30 to 40% is the transcript. And next thing is a variety of ways that you can prove your academic worth. If you're an Intel Award winner, a huge science award winner, there were like 16 in California. If you're one of those, you're getting in places. If you've been published as a writer, if you've got great standardized test scores, if your essay is great, if my recommendation is super, your teacher's recommendation, if you're in something called mathletics, a lot of different ways you can skin that cat. But they vary in quality and their impact. Now, once you fill the bill academically, then they look at you as a person. And this is a little less important, obviously more important in life. And these are all the same size, because I want to point out that they are equal in value. Sports is no better than leadership. Service is as good as working in the church. Your job is as good as anything. Your club, Boy Scout, arts, theater, dance. You can add any number of things here. And just whatever you do, be the best you can do. Whatever your two things are. Yours are music and service. Were you the best in your musical instrument? You're the top dog?
Well, in my band, yes.
Yeah, so that's what you want to be. And you want to, your other thing is service and working in hospitals. You want to do as much of that as you can. If you're an athlete, you want to be all league or the fastest runner or whatever. Now, the second thing, institutional needs. This is what they want. They need to create people from all different parts of the country. So the geography is really important. They want people to be in minor departments. So if you want to have an advantage, study geology. A lot of people don't study geology or archaeology or anthropology, things like that. So find a way to get into a lesser department. Music, everybody's going to have bands. Everybody wants to have an oboe player. There aren't very many of those. So find an instrument that'll give you a little edge here. Obviously, minority status is a good hedge, and you can become a minority. You be the minority in the place where there aren't many people like you. I talked about that before. You go to the Midwest, you go to the South. You go to Australia or Canada or the UK. Majors, they obviously have to fill all the different majors, so you have to find out what they want. Gender, guys basically have a break everywhere because there aren't as many guys on campus. So good news for you. You got a break because you're a guy. Except for engineering schools, some real hard science places, the military academies, but basically women have it tough these days. Guys have a little bit of break. Student government, obviously they have to fill that bill. So think about all of these institutional needs and where you fit into those needs. Now, explaining some other things, there are athletic admissions at certainly all the Division I schools, and Division III schools have to have athletes too. So if you're an athlete, you can use that wedge to get into a school that you normally might not get into. Now, coming back to this affirmative action is to let people into a program that they might not be represented enough. And everybody thinks, oh, it's minorities, they've got this chance, they've got an advantage. Well, that's not the case. The number one form of affirmative action in the United States has always been athletics. Athletes get a bigger break than anybody. So if you're an athlete, you move to the front of the line if you're good enough and they want you. And you have to decide whether that's good or bad, but I'm just telling you it is. There's a picture of a Stanford baseball player here. Another advantage is legacy admissions, and these are pictures of the Bushes, George H., George W. They both went to Yale. W's daughter also went to Yale, and H's father went to Yale. So we got 4 generations of people going to Yale, and that can be good, that can be bad. Most of the time, these legacies are good enough to get in on their own, but if everything else is equal, and your father went to Vanderbilt, you have a pretty good chance to go to Vanderbilt. Like, your father did some grad school at Northwestern, right? So if you've applied to Northwestern, you got a little bit of break there, right? It's going to give you an advantage. So instead of being accepted at the 10% rate at Stanford or the 15% rate at Northwestern, legacies get in at a 25 to 30% rate, or at Northwestern maybe 35 to 40%. So that's a huge deal, isn't it? That's a great advantage. Another admission is a special interest admission. If you're a movie star, an athlete, you've published things, if you're big time in the real world, they want to get you on the campus because it makes this campus look pretty clever. It will draw other people. Another one is developmental admissions. You see the big dollar sign there. If your family has tons and tons of money and they're willing to part with it, about 2 to 3 to 4% of every class, a lot of these private schools, a lot of these very expensive and also very elite schools, they swallow, I use the term swallow, they swallow the sons and daughters of these very wealthy people. Why? Because they write big checks. And these have to be very, very big checks. We're talking lots of zeros, and we're talking buildings. If your name is on a building, probably have a reasonable chance if you can do the work about getting in. So a lot of times you'll walk around campus and you'll see a lot of the similar names at these campuses where families and foundations have given money. And again, you decide whether that's fair or not, but I'm just telling you it is. So these people, Bill Gates Jr., the son of Bill Gates, the son of Donald Trump, the son of Henry Ford, the son of Steve Jobs, these people exist. They've got a pretty good chance because their parents have money in the billions. Okay, recommendations. Those are really important. That helps you get in. You have to have a couple of teachers. I'll show you what that form looks like. It's important that you get them to your teachers and your counselor 5 or 6 weeks in advance. 2 teachers, usually core teachers, math and science, English and history. It's usually good to have one as a non-teacher. Like, who would you have that's outside of a teaching class that you could have write for you?
I could get a recommendation from my flute teacher or...
And your other passion is?
The hospital.
Yeah, music in the hospital. So they write things, and they put Eric in the context of, where he was working, where he's doing his music, because we already have the teacher thing. So he's got 4 letters, and that helps us know more about Eric. Obviously, I do the one, the counselor of the secondary school report form, which puts Eric in the context of the whole school. He creates a resume and gives that to his teachers. He also gives it as part of his application. That helps admissions officers. And there's a cover letter you write to explain everything. And then you do this whole stamped addressed envelope, and we send it off. The last thing, that's coming up, and you're going to have to do that. You send a little reminder to your teachers. You don't need to remind me because I've already done, but remind your teachers and thank them before it's due. So you probably should have written that before, but do it a couple weeks before it's due. The reminder will get them out of the doldrums and they'll get it done. Okay, here's an example of the teacher evaluation. It's a form that we use. It's got all these grids and you check off boxes. This is the common application. Look at the same thing. It's a couple of pages. This is the secondary school report form that we use. Many colleges or many high schools, private schools have their own form. It's usually 2 pages. This is the school report that's on the common applications. Pretty simple, front and back. Admission dates. These are key things you got to be aware of here. The early date is November 1st, and they tell you by December 15th. You didn't do any earlies, did you?
No.
How come?
Because I wasn't sure what colleges to apply for.
Good, and I'm proud of you. If you have that self-confidence, you got to wait for the right thing. The rolling application means you just, anytime you're ready, you apply. It could be from September till the end of August. And again, these are a little easier to get in, not quite as selective, usually bigger schools. The selective schools, a lot of those that you applied to, January 1st, and they let you know by April 1st, which is sort of not enough time because you've got to visit and then make your decision by May 1st. You only have a month, a window there, and if you're like Eric, hasn't visited a lot of schools, he's got to make those decisions in a month. How are you going to do that?
I got to get busy.
It's going to be tough, okay? A lot of vicarious looking. Okay, the UC system, it's a little window, only November, and we talked about that in a prior program. So you really have to take care of that business early. Now, international students or applying to international schools, if you go South America, Canada, the UK, Eastern Europe, I've got a student applying to Sweden this year, they have plenty of time to wait because they're in a little different schedule and it's not the same as American schools. Okay, types of admissions here. Early action means you apply, you get in, but you don't have to go. Early action single choice, there's only a couple of those. Actually, there were 4, there's only 3. Yale, Stanford was. Yale and Stanford, MIT remain that. Harvard used to be, but Harvard is regular admissions now. That means you get in, but you can only apply to one of those schools. You can't apply to a whole lot of these early action types. Okay, the next one is early decision, and this is one that's tough. They have an early decision 1 date, an early decision 2 date. Either one, you can only apply to one, and if you get in, you must go, and you must pull the other applications you have. So that's a situation where you know you want to get married to this person, you apply, or you ask them, they accept, and then you're married. You can't back out of it, and you didn't do that. It wasn't for you. And then early admission, that's somebody who is like a junior, and they're ready to go to college as a junior. You get in, you don't do a senior year. That's real rare. And obviously I'm not for that. Now there's a winter admission. Middlebury is a good example. They don't have room for you in the fall, but they'll take you in the wintertime when some of their students leave. And it's a really good thing for Middlebury. There's a spring admission at Berkeley and USC, summer admission at Cal Poly. So there are different ways to skin the cat if you can't get in exactly when you want to. Now the question is, should I go early or not? My advice is if you can answer all of these questions properly, then you should apply early. And Eric, let's see if you can answer these questions. Have you visited the school?
Nope. No,
Eric shot out of the saddle already. Will you go if you're accepted? Do you know everything about the school? Okay, let's apply this to Amherst. Will you go if you're accepted to Amherst? You're thinking about it, so that means no. So he failed on the first 2 questions. Are you a match for the school? I think he's a match. You don't need to compare financial offers. That may or may not apply to you, but that's the real key thing. If you need to look at money, you shouldn't be going early. Okay, your decisions, there's basically 4 decisions. You're accepted, you celebrate, you have a piece of cake, your family celebrates, you're done. You could be deferred. That means they're going to look at you a little bit later, they're going to compare you to the rest of the class. You are on a wait list. They've decided about everybody, they create a wait list. If somebody decides not to go, then they'll go to the wait list. Some people go very deep in the wait list, some schools don't even go to a wait list. But you still have hope with a wait list. Deny, that's like execution. You got no chance. The party's over, things are done, you got to look elsewhere. And everybody gets rejected, everybody gets a denial. Okay, after you get all these things, you've got to make decisions. You either have to accept it, in some cases you can appeal. The UC system has an appeal, and we'll talk about that a little later in the year, but most schools don't have it. I think you need to write a little thank you note to people who've helped you, your parents, your teachers, and I get sort of aggressive about this. I sort of browbeat people and I force them to do it. In fact, I'm going to come after you to make sure you send your thank you notes, not because I need it, but because it's good for you. I think it's really good training for adults, teachers, parents, counselors, to get people thinking in that transition from being a kid to being an adult. Part of being an adult is that you don't need to be told those things. So we want to pattern, we want to reinforce adult behaviors. And I think it's a good thing to express gratitude. You know, it's nice to have, you put a couple hours into doing a letter, or you help somebody with volunteer stuff, or you help somebody as a teacher. It's good to be recognized, and it's really good for the giver to recognize people. So a little thank you note's pretty good. To the counselor, admissions officers even, that's a really classy thing to do. Once you get in, you tell the other places where you're not going to go, geez, I really wanted to go to your school and I looked at it, but I found another school is better for me. Shows lots and lots of classes. Like, give me 5 of your schools again.
Well, Amherst, Williams, Rice, Rochester, RPI.
Okay, wouldn't it be wonderful for you to be able to say, geez, thanks, I really appreciate the acceptance. But I'm going to go elsewhere. I mean, not to be snotty, but just to show lots and lots of class. Even try this. What if you get rejected someplace? To send them a little note. Geez, thanks for considering my application. I realize you had hard decisions. I found a place that's really good for me. I would have had a good experience at your place, but I have a good experience at this place too. Wow, what a bunch of class that is. That shows you really arrived. You're really an adult here. Tough to do. Okay, just know that there's a May 1st reply date. You're going to know April 1st. Some of the schools you know in March. Eric knows already a couple places. But he's got about a month to take care of business. And when I say take care of business, what are you going to do in that month?
I need to check if all my applications are in.
Okay, to see if they're all full, everything's done. So you have all the decisions. You know what all the decisions are. What else?
Well...
Okay, they told you their decision. What's going to go into your making your decision?
Well, I need to see which school is a match for me again.
Yeah, the absolute best match. You go back and look at your criteria. How about the money?
Well, I need to look at what I can pay for, or if I can get like a financial help, things like that.
Yeah, you got to make subtle distinctions, discriminate. Can I afford it? Is it best for me? Do I really want to go back to the snow? Have I visited the place? And then May 1st is the date. You got to sign on the dotted line. You just have to send them a little check. You've got to do some rooming things. Sometimes choose your roommates. Write letters. But you've got to have that check-in, good conscience money. And it's serious money. It's like $400 or $500 these days, and so you can't back out of it. And one thing that we really insist on is you cannot send in 2 reservations. Like you can't reserve Amherst and Rochester. That's unfair to somebody else who really, really wants to go to Rochester, and you're saving that place. So a lot of things to do for that May 1st reply date, and you can't linger on because they need to fill up. They need to make decisions. Okay, make that down payment, no double payment. You could be on the wait list, and you could be on the wait list all the way through the end of the year, even through the summer. And I've even heard cases where people have gone into classes at the next college, and they've gotten a little letter that says, hey, due to our summer meltdown, we now have a space for you. And that person left their college to go to another college, even though they paid some money. People really want to go to Brand X so badly that they'll leave Brand Y where they've attended. It's pretty rare, but I've heard of those situations. And then in the summertime, we send a final transcript to the one place that you applied to. Okay, the transition to college, there's end of the year school programs you can look into at your school. Sometimes there's a Making College Count workshop for seniors, letting go and breaking away workshop for you and your parents. A lot of different things you can do to get ready for the summer, to pack, to have parties, to say goodbye. In fact, I'm going to have a whole program for you down the line in about a month or 2 that's going to deal with this. And then your family makes their plan for the summer, you go to college, and you're dropped off, and you're on your way. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Any parting words you want to give to our audience about this whole process? Any last words of wisdom?
Well, you need to know your information, and good luck.
Yeah, good luck. It's part of luck, it's part of being prepared. And it's funny, the harder you work and prepare, the luckier you get. You sort of make your own luck. Well, we're at the end of another hour. Things gone pretty fast. I know I speak fast and get a lot of information out to you. We've talked about several things. We've talked about choosing the three hierarchies, a lot of reasons not to go to school and pick certain schools. And then today's focus was basically on the nuts and bolts of applying. Who, what, why, where, when, and how. A lot of those details that'll eventually come to you, and you'll relearn them in the fall when you need them. Go in and see your college counselor. This is not an insurmountable problem. You can do it. Things are going to turn out fine, and you're going to have some good choices. So you're at the midway or beginning part of this thing. Things are going to turn out fine. We want to thank you for both the students and parents for watching us again. We want to invite you to the next new broadcast we're going to have is March 17th. We're going to talk about what it's like on the other side of the desk. We're going to talk a little bit about the East Coast college trip that my school is taking and vicariously experience that. We're also going to talk, we're going to have an admissions officer here to pick her mind or his mind about how they see this process. We're learning it from our side. We're going to learn what it's like on their side. So we'll look forward to that. We also want to give you our last mantra here, the thing that we're trying to get. You always want to get a match, and it's never too early to start investigating and thinking about college, and it's never too late to get started to work on it. This is Dave Miller, thanking you for joining us and inviting you to our next program, and also wishing you the best of luck as you find the right college for you. Have a good day.